Welcome to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast where small business owners are celebrated as the backbone of the American economy. Each week, we introduce you to tycoons who share their stories and advice so that small business owners may learn from their experiences. Tycoons is powered by Backbone Planning Partners and Pivotal Advisors. Join us now as our hosts connect you to today's tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I am your host here, as always, Austin Peterson, coming to you live from a rainy Gilbert, Arizona. And if this is the first time that you're listening to our podcast and you're wondering what it is we do here at Tycoons of Small Biz, we are a podcast that's put together by small business owners for small business owners. Our job really is to prop up the small business owner throughout the country. We believe that that's truly the backbone of the American economy. And we have an opportunity or a platform here to be able to tell their story each and every week. So we invite a new business owner to come on, tell their story, share their successes, share their advice, share their failures, whatever it is that they can do to kind of get their message out, but also to help other aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners throughout the country. So with that being said, we definitely have a tycoon on the podcast today. But before I introduce him, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Gary Braun of Pivotal Advisors. Gary is normally in Minnesota, but he's coming to us today from Palm Springs, where he's enjoying a month in the warmer weather and getting away from those Minnesota winters. So Gary, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm really glad to be here in Palm Springs because Minnesota is just getting pounded right now by snow.
Well, today's guest is definitely aware of what that looks like and feels like. So we've got today's guest, Joe Cherluck, president of Best Tool and Engineering Company Incorporated, coming to us from Clinton Township, Michigan. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, we're going to be in the middle of it here tomorrow afternoon. So I think I should have went down to Palm Springs with you, as I didn't know you were going to be there. I probably could have made that a trip.
Yeah, well, hopefully you play golf, because that's essentially what Gary does. Gary is the first person I've ever met from Minnesota that does not fish.
Okay. Or hunt. Either one.
So Joe, here's what I know about Michiganders. I know quite a few people from Michigan, and I know that they are called Michiganders. But everybody from Michigan seems to be able to show you where they are in Michigan by holding up the hand. Show us where Clinton Township is.
Let's see, I got to get you the right way. About 20 miles north of Detroit, up in this area.
So if you're 20 miles north of Detroit, you're right on the Canadian border then, correct?
Pretty close, yeah. From my house, I can go into Marine City and see the flag on the other side. So yes, we're close to Canada.
Gotcha. All right. So Joe, before we jump into the business side of things, we always start by having our guests tell a little bit about themselves personally. And we've obviously had conversations ahead of time, so I know a bit about your story. But why don't you just tell us what you'd like us to know about you personally? Where'd you grow up? What's your family life like? Did you go to college at all? If so, what did you study? And then we'll kind of jump over to the business side afterwards.
Sure. I grew up on the west side of Detroit, suburbs there. A lower middle class family, nothing special. So not a lot to tell. Typical childhood for three brothers and a sister. Small house, 3-bedroom house. Before they started putting family rooms and living rooms in houses, small houses, you knew each other well. You didn't have rooms for dresser in there. So, went to school there. Then my dad started became a small partner in a shop. So then in my early teen years, we moved across town to the northern suburbs of Detroit. So that brought me out here and kind of started shaping the way things were going to happen. My dad was in manufacturing all his life. I mean, Polish family, it's Fat Tuesday, so it's the perfect day to have me on top of it, which is just a good hard work ethic, manufacturing type people. So that's what was in my blood. That's what I knew. I didn't know it when I was younger, but as I started cleaning up, sweeping up dad's shop, cleaning the toilets and things like that, right? When you're young, to make money on the weekends. So it started, the interest started to come there. And probably one of the things, and people talk about influencing kids for manufacturing younger. And I remember to this day, and we did a field trip in the third grade, believe this or not, third grade, we went to the Ford Rouge plant, watched steel being pulled.
Wow.
And that's just an impression that I have to this day. We were on the catwalks. They probably couldn't do that nowadays. But here we are, third graders on a catwalk, just watching this hot steel rolling down beneath our feet. But that was a big impression on me, and just to be in this type of business.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, obviously, I think that there's this change that has happened in our country probably over the last 20 years. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but where there's just been this everybody needs to go to college mentality. And, you're well aware manufacturing jobs left the country, and, there's been a huge change there. So kind of give us your thoughts on where manufacturing stands today in the US, because there does seem to be this shift kind of back, right?
Yeah.
And what about your kids? Are your kids involved in the business? Do they have interest in manufacturing the same way that your dad got you interested in it? And obviously the field trip you mentioned as well.
Well, I have 3 girls. I have 2 of them. They all worked for me at one point or another, but I never forced them into what they wanted to do. I want you to be happy. So my oldest is an artist. She does graphic novels and actually lives in Pennsylvania, but she worked for me, did my HR and things for about 5 years. They kind of had it made in high school because they got to work for dad. So what would dad do? He'd bring parts home for them to trim during the week after homework. Then they had money for the weekend. And when our friends were saying, oh, hey, let's go out for the weekend. Oh, we got to work. No, they had money. They had the weekends off. They kind of, learned that was a pretty good thing. My second daughter, Megan, she still works for me. She finished her apprenticeship in CNC. So she runs my CNCs here. And then my last daughter, who just retired from me about 6 months ago, she always wanted to be a photographer. So she was in and out of that business, and then came onto her own studio. So she left it. It was nothing she wanted to do, but she saw, hey, it paid the bills, right? And it's going to lead me into what I want to do. So now she's an entrepreneur on her own, has her own photography studio.
That's great. So for those who aren't in manufacturing, maybe describe what CNC is at the apprenticeship that your daughter just finished.
It's a machine tool. And it's kind of funny because I was just talking about this today. When I started in this business in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of change. I would go to the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit, and basically the milling machine that was there, other than it was run by a steam engine bell, hadn't changed, just put an electric motor on it when I started in this business in the late 70s. It was basically the same machine. In the 50s, 60s, they started putting NC numerical controls on machines, but obviously computers back then were very big and cumbersome. In the early 80s, they started they called them computer numerical controls, and it goes back to when the desktop started coming out with DOS. So these computers started to machines started to get a little more sophisticated in how they ran X, Y, and Z and the programming of them. So you could do, rather than it taking you days to set up to do a long run, now you could start doing short-term parts on them, onesie, twosies, and things of that nature. So these machines basically are run by code. They can be manually programmed with X, Y, and Z positions. So there's some math involved. And they used to be very math heavy. Now computer programs that are out there now can handle all the math. You can see it on the screen, run cutter paths over it. It's a lot more productive than it used to be. I can tell you in the 90s, I had about a dozen guys, and I do double that volume in sales with half the amount of people. So it's just a productivity factor has gone up so far.
All right. So I want to have you circle back, and then I'll let Gary jump in and ask a question. But so in your mind, what's the state of manufacturing in the U.S. today, and what does it look like in the next 10 years?
It depends, like with any company. It's not even manufacturing, right? It's no matter what you're doing and what that business line is. One of the mistakes, I'm in the automotive industry area, right? We're in Detroit. My sales guys don't even touch this area because I don't want automotive. They're too cutthroat. So I kind of stay away from that. And because our business is so diversified, we're not having any issues, and we're getting things coming back from overseas. What's happening with people is they want it made closer now. They've done the go to China, back and forth, traveling to China, and the issues that you have back and forth. Now, a lot of that's and there is still certain things that, hey, third world countries can do better and cheaper, right? They can make a toilet brush. But if it's got to be something that's good, maintain tolerance, got to be held, then that's got to be done here. And they want it done as close as possible to their backyard. So in the state of manufacturing right now, and I always ask the salesmen, those are the best gauges, my steel salesman, everybody that comes in, those are the guys that I ask, what's happening out there? And they're all saying the same thing. It depends on what you're doing. If you're focused on just one industry, you're not going to be around too much longer. If you're diversified out like we are, you're strong and you're busy. So we're busy. We're not having any issues. I wasn't thinking this year was going to be that great, again, with economic conditions, what they're forecasting. So you just, here you go as an entrepreneur, getting off track of our discussion is when I started this business, we made a product off a print, right? Didn't care what was happening outside. Now you have to be an economist, right? Because things are happening overseas that affect your business and what work you're going to get. Those are the kind of things that really drive it. And I think that's true for any entrepreneur. It doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, but manufacturing is well and good if you're keeping up on the current technologies and you're diversifying your sales.
I have a lot of manufacturing clients myself, and I think the whole COVID pandemic thing kind of opened their eyes because I think a lot of people were really shifting business overseas because of cost. And they could do it cheaper over in China and everything else. But then when we ran in all the supply chain shortages and everything else, it's like that's a pain. I can't wait all the time for China to ship stuff over, and they were shut down. And I think it's changed people's perceptions. Are you seeing the same thing?
Well, it started in 08, 09. Okay. 08, 09, where everybody else, I don't know how I was the lucky one. Effectively, Rome's burning around, right? I go out the door and there's a for sale sign on every building on my street, and I'm buying new equipment. Okay, at that time, we just happened to hook up with a company to do medical carts. It was for medical IT. Government had mandated you're going to have everything on computers. So we were right in that rush with that. So how this came about was the company I got involved with, they were getting their carts from China. Well, they couldn't get them fast enough as they could sell them. So he said, you know what? We're in the Detroit area. I got all these unemployed engineers at the big three. Let's bring them on. And he said, hey, I'm going to reinvent the wheel here, come up with a better mousetrap, which he did. He grew that company exponentially from, I think they started at 5 million, and within 3-4 years, he sold it at 80 million.
Wow.
But he saw that value of, I can only get so much from China, and I have this. So he sourced everything here, everything he possibly could. There are still things you still can't source in this country because it went away, and it would be too expensive to bring it back and restart it here. But the better portion of everything on this cart he sourced here, then he was able to deliver on a timely fashion to the customer. So we kind of saw that start back then.
Joe, I'm always interested with entrepreneurs. I read a little of your background. I saw your story on your website and everything. What made you make the leap? So you bought a one-man shop way back in 91. Yep. You kind of grew up in the business and whatnot. What makes an entrepreneur suddenly go, I'm going out on my own, which is scary. We've been there before. Did you have customers lined up already? Or that first leap is always interesting to me. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Okay. This kind of interesting because it's good for anybody, because to preface this, I see a lot of talk, a lot of articles on LinkedIn, and people want to teach entrepreneurship. Okay. I'm not sure. I'm never saying never, right? But I'm skeptical that you can teach it. I think you can nurture it in the right people, right? That may not have had the opportunity, but there is something there. So in that, it's a little bit of a story here, but I'll kind of go through it because it is interesting because I wasn't born this lower middle class family. So I wasn't born into money, didn't have money or anything. My dad was a small minority partner. His company only lasted about 10 years. I started in co-op in high school, working in a manufacturing company, and they offered for me to start an apprenticeship. And I says, well, I'm only in 11th grade, right? In high school, they said, we don't care. So I was in 11th grade. I was going to school at high school till noon, working from noon to 6 o'clock in the shop, and then going to college at night, starting in the 11th grade. That went till I was 29 years old. Once I started, and that's a good way to do it. Pay as you go, never had a student loan. So I finished my journeyman tool and die maker apprenticeship. And I said, well, I'm going to keep going. So I got a manufacturing engineering degree and I got electrical engineering degree to go with it. So then I just continued working. But about that time when I finished school, I kind of hit 29 and said, you know what, I'm schooled out. I've put 10 plus years of school. I should have a doctorate right by now. I got but again, it was all while working full time. I mean, I'm working 10 hours a day and going to school at night. So what it really ended up happening is I kind of started getting bored. All my life, I had bought my house when I was 25. I got all these degrees done, set all my goals, and I hit all my goals. I'm 29 and I've hit all these goals. So what do I do now? Because I didn't think beyond that, because I didn't think that would happen that quickly, right? So it really boredom. I started doing work on the side. I started programming CNC machines on the side. I started, I don't know if you guys remember when they started with desktop computers, when you could start buying parts and put computers together yourself. So I started selling those, put the DOS in it and train people how to use it. It was kind of that, you're going on a date and it goes, no, it's not a date. It's kind of like, no, this isn't a business. It's not a date. It's not a business. But just, so I was doing this on the side. And I remember when I was working, going back in the mid 80s, I was working at my dad's company and one of his part-time employees come up to me and he says, he was really impressed with my work ethic and all and complimenting me. He says, you're going to be a business owner someday. And you know what I said to him? I said, I'm not that stupid. Okay. So you can see so far where this is going. There is like no sign of any of this. I don't want any part of running a business. I'm happy coming in, punching in at 7:00, going home at 5:30 every day. So as the course of just doing these side jobs, I ran across a company that was in financial distress. They wanted me to do some programming for them. Then once the gentleman that was running it could see what I could do, offered me to, said, hey, I'll give you a small part of the company. Gave me 5% just for incentive. So I spent 2 years there and turned the company around. It was an interesting lesson. How do I want to say it? The owner of the company was less than ethical. Okay. So it was an experience, but it was a learning experience. Even though it was how not to do it, it's still a learning experience, right? Because if you look at all of my background, so I've got manufacturing, engineering, I got a journeyman. Where do I have any business experience? Where do I have any business going into business, right? So this was kind of my hard knocks learning experience, how to run a business. I got to go in the office, see what, dig them out of trouble in the office, work with the accountant. So I for 2 years I did that, turned the company around, but basically he was spending money faster than I could make it. So I said, you know what? And none of this ever was planned or I want to be an entrepreneur. It was just kind of evolved. I say it evolved into. I mean, if you would have asked me when I was 25, 20, 30, I would have said no. I said it. I said, no, you're nuts. I'm not that stupid. But it just kind of evolved into becoming the shop owner. I can do better. I'm bored. I want to move on and do some things.
Well, just pause there for a second, Joe. So you're a technical person. You
exactly
got your education. You got your apprenticeship. You understand how to do the work. But now you walk into this company that's upside down a bit, and now you're diving into numbers and you're looking at how to use. I love entrepreneurs. I turned it around like that's just an easy thing to do. So what did you walk into? What did you turn around when you got into this business? What did you find?
Well, I mean, just payables that hadn't been paid for years. And I mean, just very little work. I mean, I brought most of the work in from people I knew. He had one small job. That's how I got started. But when I came in, people knew me. I brought some of that business in with me. Not a lot, but I was able to turn it around. We went from basically nothing to, I think we were doing about $500,000 a year in 2 years, and starting to pick up new customers. But again, it was a situation of, He was one of these guys. Every customer was a new customer, right? I don't know if I gotta go any further than that, but every customer has to be a new customer because they weren't happy at the end of the day with him. Whether he tried to nickel and dime them somewhere along again, and it was a great learning experience. Don't do this to people. Don't do that to people. Not only that, but it got to a point to where it was like, well, if I'm going to start a business, I got to get out of here because my reputation is going to go down with this guy. Right. So I got to move on because before it gets to be too late. Besides, I won't get into tax issues, and he paid his taxes most of the time, some of the time, so we won't. But again, it was a somewhat of a learn, and this was a trial by fire. Okay, you had a guy here doing this who did not know how to run a business either, was more technical. Okay, so I still didn't really I had enough knowledge, okay, but not enough, right? And I can admit, you think you know enough, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So that was the thing, and that thing is what really held me back for a long time in this business, was thinking I had enough knowledge, but not, in the business end. By the same token, if I had gone to a business school and I went out and I just started a business, I would have ran into a gentleman like I was working for, and he would have fleeced me, right? So there's things you need to know in both ends of this business. But it did hurt me for a lot of years not having enough, because I didn't realize business was good. The 90s were good to me. I started in 91. It was September of 91. Recession, 2 kids, 1 on the way. So you don't do that if you can help it. But timing being what it was time to do that, right? So it was a challenge. So I mean, the first years of running my business, how I ran my business from an office standpoint. Okay, we shipped enough this first week to pay rent. Great. That was my books, right? Yeah. Okay, next week we've got the electric bill paid. Great. So that's how it started.
What were the big first steps that you take? So we bought out our partner. Let's set that aside for a second. But now it's your business, and we want to get past managing, paycheck to paycheck and job to job. So what was your first big key to growing this thing up?
Okay, honestly, so I started in 91. My big first key was in 2019. Okay. I did it the hard way. I grew the business. You know how I grew the business? I outworked you. The other thing I can tell you from my dad, one of the pieces of advice he gave me that was good advice at the time, but hurt me, was, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Great advice, but not if you're going to run a business, right?
It doesn't scale real well.
Exactly. Okay. And that was the problem, the scaling of it. I would plateau grow, right? You'd hit that plateau, you'd hit something, and you'd go down. You'd go up, you'd go down. I watched my business, the curve of sales. Like I said, 90s was great. 2000s came in a recession. And in this business, in this area, I don't know if you know how the automotive pays their bills, but I'm tiered down 3-4 tiers down, right? They don't even know who I am. The automotive pays their bills to their tier 1s 90 days after start of production. So that means until 90 days after they start making cars, their tier 1s don't get paid. So all during the late 90s, what was happening in this town was you had companies going out of business, going in front of a judge saying, I'm filing bankruptcy. I have 50 million in receivables and I only have 20 million in payables. But everybody was cash broke.
Yeah.
They had no money. And I did really well up to about 2000, hit a recession. If you look at 2000, the decade of 2000, GM was functionally bankrupt, right? That whole decade. I mean, they were just hanging on by a thread. So the business really dropped off, plus everything went overseas in the late 90s. That started 98, 99. By the 2000s, I mean, there's nothing. And this town is dead. 2005, I'm 45 years old, going, okay, everybody is saying, and 2000 was my worst year. I laid everybody off. I was down to myself. I told all my guys, I said, don't sell your tools, but find another career. Because that was what it was. Everybody was telling you. Think about if you're an entrepreneur and people are naysaying you. All I heard for the whole decade of the 2000s was shut it down and find something else to do. So 2005, I hit 45 and I said, okay, what do I want to do? I'm at a pivotal point where I could sell the equipment off, go back to school, do something else. But the only thing I wanted to do was teach at the time. So I took a hard look at it and said, well, in Michigan, everything was, you got to remember, governments were having trouble at the time. They weren't making payments. All teacher salaries were getting cut. So if I was going to do it, I'd have to move to North Carolina. The salaries weren't very good. So I after a lot of thought, I said, you know what, I'll just downscale because I have enough work to get by. We ended up getting into some making glass block windows and what was big during the 2000s, housing, right? And again, it's following the markets, right? So kind of dumbly, this ain't my brain's like, hey, let's get in housing. This was all dumb luck, right? God looks out for stupid people, right? And I believe he was looking out for me because here we got into housing business and we muddled through. I mean, I would say we muddled through from 2000 to 2008 as a nonprofit. Okay. If we made profit, there wasn't anything to speak of. But I said, you know what? I don't know anything else. I can keep it going. I can make a profit if I continue to downsize the company. So 08, 09, again, when we got into the medical stuff, that's when it started to turn around for us. And the lights started to go off and started going, okay, this job isn't going to last forever, which it did. It plateaued. It went up because the government mandated, right? Everybody got their carts. And then guess what? All the big suppliers that I worked for, they all sold off. They took their profits and ran for the next thing. And I started going, I got to start looking at it the same way. You got to follow the markets, follow the sales, look at which way, where is the next trend going to go? But still and we did very well. We probably doubled our size. We doubled our space from 2008 to about 2018. But I still could not get a certain the growth that I wanted. I couldn't scale. Okay. That was the problem. And I didn't even know that term scale, right? That's what I'm saying. So here I am. I'm already 20 some years in the business and still just beating my head because, again, not having that business acumen, having a mentor. I mean, that would be the biggest thing I would suggest to people. Get a mentor. There's a lot of programs in different areas. I did just do a talk in North Carolina in November about that. And it was sad because one of the things I realized as I was giving the speech was that, most of the people here aren't the ones that need to hear it. It's the ones that are tied up in their business and aren't getting out there. But that's the key, that it's really in understanding, get some outside help. Yep. So, and it was kind of an interesting story as to, and we could probably, I think we're coming up on a break here pretty soon. Well, maybe we'll go into that story next, what really my epiphany was and how that changed over. Because, still, I would still be struggling to this day to get my company any further than it is if I hadn't learned the business end of it and what I could do and to give me that ability to scale the company like we're doing now. I mean, the sales today, we're getting calls from all over the country. Now, Canada, we're doing work for everybody and people are seeking us out. Whereas prior to that, I didn't know anything about sales. If sales were, hey, the phone rang, people that I knew, right? And that's what a lot of it is. The first few years is the people Well, that runs out after a while. And you're sitting here going, well, hey, things are great. Well, but the phone ain't ringing anymore. I can't make this company grow anymore. What's missing? So, and that's the key, is what's that missing piece? Again, not having that business background, business degree, never took a class on business. Every class I took was technical. Be good at what you know.
We're up against the break here, so we will pause here in just a minute for a call to action. And I know what you're going to say about 2019. So, and I know our listeners want to hear that. So I'm excited to have you kind of go through that and what you changed in 2019. But before we do that, I want to kind of just throw this out there. That the reality is you may have done it longer than some. I wouldn't say most, right? Because you went the way that you went. You ran the organization the way that you ran it, just based on your technical know-how, the people that you know, sheer grit, hard work, determination, all those kinds of things. Almost every entrepreneur will start out that way, right? The point is, like, how do we get to that next level? And you're gonna share what you did, which I love, and the fact that for people who are listening, a lot of people know how to paint or manufacture this or do that, be an HVAC contractor, whatever the case may be. Well, I'm good enough to go out and do this on my own. So they go out and do it on their own, but they get to that plateau that you mentioned earlier. And it's because they typically don't have that business know-how. But too many people believe that the only way to get that business know-how is to actually stop what they're doing or go to school in the evenings at a traditional university. And you're going to share with us that there are other ways to do that. You mentioned the mentor program, but you're also going to mention kind of what you did here in 2019. So hold that thought for a second, grab a drink of water. We'll share a quick call to action in 30 seconds or so. We'll be back and we'll talk about what you did in 2019 that shaped where you are today.
Hey there, Tycoons. Austin Peterson here, co-host of Tycoons of Small Biz. If you think you have what it takes to be considered a tycoon and you're wondering how you could become a featured guest, please follow and then message us at Tycoons of Small Biz on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a conversation with you to see if it is a mutually good fit, and if so, we'll get you scheduled for an interview. If you're unsure about being a guest on our podcast, but are contemplating selling your business over the next few years and you'd like to know what your business is worth, please also follow us and then message us on LinkedIn for your no-obligation, informal valuation of your business. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening to the Tycoons of Small Biz podcast. And now, back to today's program.
All right, Tycoons, welcome back. Austin Peterson and Gary Braun here, co-hosts of Tycoons of Small Biz. We're talking to Joe Cherluck today, president of Best Tool and Engineering Company out of Clinton Township or Detroit, Michigan. And to this point, Joe has shared quite a bit about his journey, the first 28 years being in business and what kind of led him to that point. But now we're going to give Joe an opportunity to tell us what he did in 2019 that has really just completely changed the trajectory of his company over the last 3 or 4 years now. So Joe, take it away.
Okay. Well, Austin, like you said just before the break, and we start our business because we're passionate about something, right? And it doesn't have to be it can be anything. And I look back when I started, it's a wing and a prayer, right? Most business owners, they start with a passion for their work, right? I can do it better attitude. I can tell you after now 30 years in business, learning the hard knocks way, the one definitive statement I can make is passion is not a strategy and passion is not a plan. That's the problem, okay? You can only, with passion, you can only get as far as the day can take you, right? Not only that, but I fought that thing with my dad. You got to do it yourself if you want it done right. Well, guess what? Why could I not scale? You can see the fallacy in that. So around early 2019, I started doing something that I stayed away from that I was actually afraid of doing, which was networking. Okay. Networking to me was, I'm just going to get a bunch of salespeople calling me for things that I don't want, or people that want things I can't give, right? They're going to want money. They're going to want. So I stayed away from networking, but I decided, I have to do something. I have to get out there. So I started networking, getting out and doing some things. Out of the blue, I get a call from my county economic development. They said, yeah, we heard of you from somewhere, but we don't know where. But we'd like to come down and talk to you. So I said, okay, great. But yeah, I'm trying to get out there and get myself out and be seen. So definitely come on out. So they came out and they had, and again, this is just look into this. You get everybody all over the country. States customers are you, the small businessman, right? That's where they derive their revenue. The state's competition is other states. So get with your county, and between states, county to county. They come out and they had these two programs that they put out in front of me. One was a program that's out of Western Michigan, the Edward Lowe Foundation, which was a good foundation. Again, and there's plenty of these. But the other one that really piqued my interest because of the way they presented it is, what's holding you back? Why can't you scale and grow? And I'm going, okay, yes, that's what I've been looking for years now. And they presented me this Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. Anybody that is not familiar with, but it's Goldman Sachs philanthropic arm. They realize that, hey, just like you guys doing this program, Goldman Sachs realized small business is the backbone, right? Small businesses become bigger businesses. So what can we do to help them grow? This program was free. I mean, before they left, when the county left, I ran to my computer and I was signing up. I mean, how can I not do this? It's free. And there is certain criteria. You have to be in business so X amount of years. You have to have at least turned a profit at some point. There's a little bit of criteria there. I met all the criteria, which was great. And I was, luckily, other people hadn't been accepted. I was accepted on one of the first go-throughs that we went through. This program changed completely my whole thinking. I call it an MBA in a box. It was a 3-month program. It was Fridays, okay, all day Friday. You left the business, because that was the first thing they asked you in an interview was, who's going to run your business while you're not there? Well, I was well established enough to where I'm here now and it's running and I have people there, so I'm okay. But they asked me what I wanted to get out of the program. And I told them, I just keep hitting this ceiling. I cannot grow this company. I get so far and I stop. I hit a ceiling one way or another, and I can't figure out what it is that the problem is to get me moved on. They asked me if I wanted to know about the program, what was going to be involved, and I said no. Surprise me. And it was a surprising, and it was the program is funded by Goldman Sachs. It is the whole business portion of it is that the curriculum is set by Wharton School of Business. And the teachers, people that they have come in are just top-notch people. Local universities are involved. They fly people in to see, they had a negotiations expert. I mean, that was one of the things. I'm no negotiator. I'm just some little guy out here. How am I going to, always afraid to go into a customer and do an ask, right? This negotiations class, like, it changed my whole vision of how you negotiate with people. And that person who they brought in was Maury Tapur. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she negotiates for the NFL. She's written books, excellent negotiator, very simplistic 2 nights of classes that just open your eyes as to negotiating with people. What do you want? Going in prepared. One of the simplest things was going in prepared, right? And you don't think about it, but do your homework. What do you want? What do you want to get out of this? Then they went through all the business aspects from managing the business, from the books, but it was really keyed, not only managing, and there was businesses, I'm manufacturing, there was an accountant there. So, what does an accountant need? Well, they're great at the books, but what do they know about sales and marketing? So this touched on all of the pieces that were missing. So I may have been good at something, and they put us in groups, and I could see that. I mean, they did a very good job at putting people in groups when they did the interviews of who could help each other in certain areas, because you always had somebody strong at your group before that could lend some advice as to a particular situation, whether it was a technical question on accounting or something like that. But this program but it was really focused on growth, because I really didn't understand until we got into the first few weeks what they were really pushing was the growth, which is the thing that I was missing, the growth and the growth opportunities, right? So how do you make your company grow? So besides being scalable, knowing all the business things they're teaching you, the biggest thing at the end of this program was you had to pitch a growth opportunity. So you had to come up and say, okay, what's my growth opportunity? What am I going to do with it? How am I going to make it happen? At the end of the program, you pitched in front of real bankers that had money to fund you. So it's no lightweight class, and it's a realistic taste of growth and what you can possibly do. I was always afraid, again, based on my experience prior to this, I don't want to see more than 20% growth any given year, because I did that. I hit 20% growth not knowing, and it was very difficult to manage when you don't have all the business. That's all I could manage was 20% growth. After this program, I don't care if it's 100% growth. I know how to do it, how to manage it, how to put the right people in the right place to get that growth done.
Joe, what sounds like an awesome program, and I think a lot of the tycoons who are listening can relate to that ceiling. They get to a certain point, they can't get past it. I hear it all the time as we deal with small businesses. If you look back now with your newfound knowledge and what you've applied and everything, if you look back, what do you think were the one or two or three things that were most limiting you from breaking through that ceiling?
Sales in the plan of growth. The plan of growth. So I've already kind of got my succession plan in place and bringing up my protege behind me. And I've already challenged him with what's our next growth thing. I don't need to know today, but if all we're going to do is sell widgets, I mean, there's that thinking of do one thing and be the best at it, right? So I'm going to have a widget and I'm just going to sell this widget and do nothing else. Hey, that may go great for a while until Jim down the street comes up with a better widget, right? So what's our next plan? And again, fundamentally, things are changing so fast in whether it's manufacturing or any business. Like I said, I'll go back to where I said I go to the Henry Ford Museum and this machine hadn't changed from the early days to the 70s. Now the change is exponential. So what are we doing? What are we going to do next? I don't see this company being exactly the same, doing the same thing it is in 10 years. We may not. But if we're not watching and focusing on growth opportunities, the problem with focusing on growth opportunities is, so here's the breakout thing, is if you're too busy working in the business because I have to do everything myself if I want to do it right, then I cannot focus on those growth opportunities. Now I can
that. So having knowing where your growth is going to come from and having a planner on that's a key piece.
Yep.
And then you just kind of threw in the word sales, and my hair on the back of my neck went up because that's my wheelhouse. So what about sales did you learn that you had to do differently?
Well, get a sales department, because I didn't know the difference between sales and marketing, right? If you would have told me what's the difference between sales and marketing, I'd have been honest. I'd tell you 2 years ago, this is 9, time's flying, right? So in 2018, sales and marketing, they meant the same thing to me.
Yeah.
Right. And networking, getting out there, hiring a sales team to do things, having a plan, what we could grow, what is our strength? Fundamentally, we're a plastics company, okay? We can do cradle to grave. We do products where we drop ship for customers out or anything in between, okay? Well, if you want a plastic part, you can go to Google an injection mold company and say, there's 100 of them. I'm not that biased to say I'm the best in the world. We're a good, very good company, and there are a lot of other good competitors. But what can I do to set myself apart?
Yes.
And what this did, and it's something that actually that brought out in me this class that I wanted to do, was since the 70s, we were involved in plastic bonding welding. And it really showed me this class in developing this growth opportunity and how to look at it, how to plan it and say, is it going to be feasible? I found a big hole, because in this welding market, there is nobody that does smaller run stuff. The equipment is expensive. So nobody does smaller run stuff except us now. I don't know too much competition. So now that's how we go in with our marketing. We offer you this. This is something and people are now seeking us out for that expertise, because normally our business from the welding came from the machine manufacturers who sold the tooling that we made to go in the machine, okay, with the machine as a turnkey product. And that's the way they liked it. That's the way they wanted it. And that way they could button it all up and have a sale. Never did they think, you could increase your sales with a smaller, get the smaller guys to be able to do this. They sold it as kind of a turnkey. This is all it's good for, but the machine can be retooled for anything you want.
That's a huge lesson. I mean,
right. So
I find any business has a hard time differentiating themselves, but you found the segment that you can talk to. Now it's go find everybody within that segment that needs short run. And now your salespeople have better direction and everything else. That's brilliant. That's awesome.
Because what we did in one of the classes I had at Edward Lowe on sales was everybody was looking for the magic Google thing, right? How can I be on the first page on Google, right? And I said, we don't have to be on the first page on Google for injection molding, but we are if you go look up hot plate or vibration welding. You'll get the machine manufacturers, then you get us. Now we have people, we're the first ones to come. We're doing work for Buell Motorcycles is coming back. You go on a bike week since you're down there, you'll see our work on Buell Motorcycles. How did we get that business? Because, and I specifically, we ask now, right? How did you find us? He said, well, they're in Grand Rapids. He said they typed in hot plate welding in Grand Rapids. Nothing there. Hot plate welding, Michigan. Guess what? Guess who's first?
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody else can do it. And he even said, we have multiple molders near us that could do this job, except they can't weld these two parts together. So who gets the job? We've got a new one that we're working on developing. It's in the battery sector, and they're out of British Columbia. They seeked us out the same way, out of Google, because of our expertise in plastic welding, because they need two parts, but it's not a high volume. It started out at 3,000. Now they're saying it's up to 8,000. So obviously right there. So now we've got people coming to us, looking for us. You have to be a leader, not a follower. Okay. And that's the other big thing. You want people to be copying what you're doing, which is why I say, what's our next growth opportunity? I don't know what it is yet, because we're still following through on this one, getting all the equipment we need. But you've got to continue to look forward and say, what's that next big thing? What do we need to do? Is it something a little bit? I mean, you want to stay within your area of expertise, right? I'm not going to go start a car wash. I make plastic parts. Stick with what you know, right? But there's still a wide variety. In my case, in plastics, it's a blessing and a curse. But what is plastics in? Everything.
Yeah.
So my market is huge, right? But that's also a curse. How do I target all that market? There's not enough money to target all that market. So that's why we kind of honed in on utilizing this specific, okay, this is what we do best, this welding. Let's do that to bring the work in.
Now that is a trap that a lot of companies get into, is they know how to do this thing. They're like, anybody could use it, but it's really hard to become a master at everything. You have to understand what's important to each industry and how they use it and everything else. And even the salespeople that you hire for that is going to be different, because their knowledge is going to be different.
Right. And we technically sales. Like, I have a good salesman. He's excellent at running down the leads. But when he finally gets that lead, me or one of the engineers will go with them that can talk technical, right? Because if I'm going to come and sell you something, we've all been through the salesman thing. I don't want to hear the BS. I want to hear what you can do for me. Again, it's identifying those kind of things. But again, backing up, I can't stress it enough, is if you're out there every day working on your business and turning handles on a machine, or you're out in the store running the cash register, you don't have time to think of these things, right? I wouldn't have had time to think, how can I leverage this knowledge we know into the sales? Because why? Because I'm working. Again, what did I do for 30 years? I outworked you. Man, I put you out of business because I worked 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wasn't that great? And thank God my wife is still with me, okay? I've given her plenty of reasons to suffocate me in my sleep, I always say. But, she understood I was doing what I was happy and what I was passionate about. But again, having that time in the business to think about your sales and your growth in those things. That's the key. That's if you want to grow. You've got to get away from you have to do everything. Right people, right spots. Again, part of the program was hiring the right people. How do you find the right? I mean, the first thing I started looking for when I got out of the program was an executive assistant, right? I said, I got to find somebody to do all this menial stuff that I have to keep running down myself to give myself, where can I give myself more time? Where do I need to put people in certain places? And there's a lot of programs out there that can help you do that, whether it's mentors, there's local programs, whether it's in disadvantaged areas in Detroit, they got some. We're working on our own utilizing EOS a little bit. We're not fully EOS, but we kind of already recognize where our problems are. I mean, we're working big on process for scaling. Also, while we're working on the sales, we're really honing our process for scaling and hiring too, because obviously the hiring issue is such a troubling issue now. So we're working on a full training program where we can just bring people in off the street. If they have the enthusiasm to do it, we'll teach you how to do it.
Yeah, well, excuse me. What I hear from you, Joe, is, you ran this business for 28 years by blood, sweat, and tears, whatever it took to make it kind of, stay together and figure out a way to make a living for your family. And, at different times for other families, and at other times it was just, your family. But then, what I hear is, I'm trying to do some quick math. You're probably 62, 63 based on a comment you made earlier. And I hear newfound desire, newfound energy, newfound, opportunities in front of you, all because you met with somebody from your local council on economic development who turned you on to this Goldman Sachs program. And then you learned all these things that you'd been missing throughout your business for the previous 28 years. And it's completely changed your life.
Yes, get out there and network. Like I said, that was probably my biggest mistake, was not getting out and networking with people, talking to people. And it's so much easier now, just on LinkedIn, you can get into groups. There's roundtable groups, right? Management groups. The other thing I was always concerned with was the one we went for a weekend at Edward Lowe for a retreat. And if you got a chance, look up the Edward Lowe Foundation. It's a fantastic organization. But we went there, and the first evening we're introducing each other. So, I'm who I am. I do plastics. And then there's this gentleman over here. He does socks, sells socks on the internet. This other gentleman, he does siding and insulation. And I'm sitting there going, where's the manufacturing people? These people don't know what my business is like. They don't know what my problems are. And then through the course of that weekend, the light goes on as we're discussing all the same problems that we have, right? So don't go seeking out. It doesn't matter. You get into like a roundtable discussion with different businesses. We all have the same problems. So, there are some.
I found the same thing, Joe. I'm in a roundtable bunch of CEO peer group as well.
Yep, and they're fantastic.
They're awesome. And I find a construction person and a professional service person and one person who owns a school bus company and everything else. And they have nothing in common with my business, but everything in common with how to run a business. And that's really where I get the back.
Exactly. And that was my mistake, is I stayed away from all of those kind of things. And I'm urging you, do it sooner than me. Okay. It's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run. I remember one night I was spending it, ended up having like a evening just get together. And I was the guys that were selling their socks on the internet. It was the first time that they started getting competition and they were losing sales. So, at least I could give them, from my perspective, hey, my sales have just been a roller coaster. Here's how I got through. You got to persevere. You got to do something different. Definitely get involved in programs. Again, start at your county economic development, your state economic development. They're all there to help you succeed, because at the end of the day, that's where their revenue is derived, through our tax money, right? They want you to succeed. They're the enemy, right? It was like the other thing the Goldman Sachs thing taught me is I was all under the impression that the banker is my enemy. Okay. And now I have the best relationship with my banker. Why? Because now I know how to talk to him. I know what he wants to hear, what he was expecting. Okay. And I understand what I'm talking to him about. So every year when we re-up our credit line, I always almost do like a publicly held company. I give them a synopsis of the year, where I think we're going. And you know what? I never have a problem. I always used to have problems. I probably change banks more than people change their socks, right? And now I've got a good relationship with a banker because I understand from his perspective what he's looking for.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, your energy is infectious. I feel like we could talk all day, but what you've shared today with our audience and with us as the co-hosts, I think has been invaluable. It's great to see this newfound energy of somebody who's owned a business for over 30 years now, and this foresight into the future and this excitement for the future. So I want to tell you, thank you for being willing to come on our podcast and share your story. And hopefully there are plenty of people who are listening and realizing that this is them. They're living this, and there are some things that they could have picked up along the way today in our conversation that will help them to be in the spot that you're in today as well.
Yep. And anything I can do to help, I'm willing to give back. And so, yeah, that's the thing is just get out there and get yourself out there.
Yeah. So what's the best way if anybody wants to reach out? Obviously, whether it's, they need the plastic moldings or the welding done, how do they get in touch with you, or for you personally, from a mentor standpoint, or any questions they have?
Website, www.bteplastics.com. And my email is joe.cherluck@bteplastics.com, which I use BTE Plastics, but I bought the company. It was Best Tool and Mold, and I kept Best Tool and Engineering. I thought it was pretentious, but I said, you know what? I'm going to live up to the name. It forced me to live up to the name, right? And I said, I really don't like the name, but I kept it for that reason. Just again, hard-headedness.
Well, that's great. Once again, really appreciate the conversation, Joe. Appreciate you being here. Gary, any closing comments from you?
No, it's some valuable lessons there, Joe. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, because I think a lot of people, whether in their manufacturing or any business, they hit that ceiling and they don't know how to get through it. So some good lessons about how to get out of the business, make a plan, figure out where growth is coming from, and get help on the outside, because you can't do it all yourself. So great lessons. I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So just one last comment. If you like what you've heard today and like the content that we're putting out here at Tycoons of Small Biz, please go online to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us and like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks for being here today.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast for small business owners by small business owners. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Arizona time for an introduction to another great tycoon. And be sure to follow us on our social media channels for links to all of our episodes and great